Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, in a pink hat if you're on YouTube, but if you're on anything else, which you probably are, I'm wearing a pink hat. Anyway, and on the other end, not in a pink hat, and an Adidas t-shirt.
Isn't that like, I don't know, a style of people who are always wearing that? Like the ones who are going to Love Island or so?
I'm into that look. Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah. Someone was surprised I was 30 years old the other day, and I was like, "No, yeah, I'll take it. I prefer to look younger than I am."
Because they thought that you're older, or because you're younger?
they thought I was. I hope they thought I was quite a bit younger. So it's not until I show them how far my hair has receded, then they're like, "Okay, actually, I'll refer you to my doctor."
And it's like, "Oh, I'm taking it back. It's not 20, it's 40 actually."
40. Oh. Damn my hairline. But yeah, someone recently has referred me again to a, what's it called, transplant place.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who is on two friends who underwent surgery. And yeah, they would highly recommend it. What?
They have luscious locks.
But they didn't transplant it from the back of their head, but more so from their ass, because they wanted to have the ass head look.
The ass head look. What even is that?
I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
It makes sense. How are things on your end?
Yeah. First week back at, in quotation marks, the gym, normal training again. After, still, I'm still not feeling super over the hill, to be honest. I talked about like my eyes getting very tired, and it's still that case that whenever I'm wearing contact lenses, it's though as if I've worn them the entire day already, which is normally just the case when I'm super tired or something else is going on. But yeah, so here we are now, getting or finding our way back into the groove of things. SLDLs felt, sorry for that, super heavy at home, but also I'm kind of doing them in a deficit. Because the 20 kilogram plates are not the normal size of a 20 kilogram plate. And I don't know how much of a difference that actually makes, the couple of centimeters more of a range of motion. I would assume, due to the position that you're putting yourself in, that is the hardest from the ground upwards, then I could imagine that it makes a huge difference. Yeah. I don't know, what's your take on that, Steve?
I haven't ventured into deficit ones yet because I've just about nailed the ones just off the floor, and I've got my hip positioning and not my lower back rounding. But I was saying to you, I was doing deficit barbell rows. Barbell bent over rows just as a variation because I haven't got much at home, and they felt amazing. And so I have to use a lot less weight, and almost it forces me to be stricter with my form. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, really. I think it's a new movement, so I had to lower the load quite a lot. So I'm being stricter. Then they feel great. So I imagine it makes quite a difference.
Oh, sorry for that.
Sorry.
That was impolite to cut you off. What I wanted to ask, though, is on the bend over rows, right? When I'm doing something like flexion rows, my lower back is slightly rounded, but I think that it's still to an acceptable range, because we know that a round back is not primarily just a round back. We are moving on a spectrum where it's like, okay, this is the acceptable range of flexion up until that point, and then after that, it's kind of more in the risky territory. I don't know, are you experiencing the same thing when you're doing something like deficit rows, that the lower back is, how should I put it? You feel that it's slightly rounding, but when you look back on video, it's nothing that is very much sticking out.
For flexion rows, I think you're actually ideally rounding at the lower back, but because the weight's so light, it's not such a problem. That's at least what I interpreted those as being. But yeah, when I'm doing the barbell rows, I try not to let it round at all. It might, like I think I said to you, like sometimes I can feel like it's going, so I have to like ultimately really kind of get the quality there again and kind of get my core stability there. So, and yeah, in video it doesn't really look like it's rounding.
Yeah, it's hard to describe because it's hard to describe because when we are saying, I don't know, also other examples such as proper execution, what does it mean? Because we all have a different understanding of what proper execution may mean. I hope it's kind of similar, right? But of course, when you then ask someone like, what's your technique like? no, it's great. Absolutely. And then you look over it and it's just, I don't think that it's great. We can actually improve upon that. And maybe then also here in regards to what is rounding of the lower back, perhaps I can't really describe what I mean. It more is a feeling instead of something that you very much can detect from the outside. But I can feel when it's too much of a deficit, for example. So with normal bend over rows, no issues whatsoever unless I'm using very small plates, then I can feel that there is a little bit of a rounding, but nothing to the extent where I would say like this is bad necessarily, because it still provides a little bit of a stimulus to that part of the back as well, but not to the extent where you're losing kind of the tension in the back that then goes towards, I don't know, that the spine needs to take over or so.
Yeah, I know from seeing some of Jacob Templar, so many Jacob different last names went through my mind. I was like, Jacob Lenarden, Jacob Wilson, Jacob Templar, the physio who we've had on the podcast. I know he's done some posts in terms of like backgrounding and how actually, even visually, if it looks like it's not rounding, it could have degrees of kind of flexion in there. And it's like, oh, okay. And so it's not necessarily bad. I know someone called me out on my belt squats because my like lower back like kind of rounded, but there's no loading through the lower back. It's all like, and I don't feel it in the slightest. So when I was doing it, I was like, I didn't think my lower back was doing that. And then you look back and I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel like that. So it is, it's one of those kind of, I think generally when you're doing something a bit wrong. Yeah,
I think it can be felt then, whether it's a lower back rounding that may be risky, or it's a lower back rounding where you still have full control and it's kind of intentional as well. Because, for example, on something like the chest-supported T-bar rows, I'm intentionally like rounding as much over as possible, right? And then coming back as far as I can so that the erectors are also properly trained in that movement as well.
Yeah, that is nice when you're supported and you can just stretch everything over.
It's
like
crazy.
I had a T-bar row. I had one in Soho gyms when I was living in Clapham, and I never really used it very much.
Oh boy, such a good movement.
I haven't had one.
Yeah. So no, but other than that, nutrition. I'm right now having set the plans moving forward. So I will be. I never got back to your question on the messages as well. So the plan for me is right now that I actually got back into a caloric surplus, because even though that it's just a short period of time, I think it's better than just staying at maintenance for the time being. Right. So I'm having a mild surplus though. Man. I don't know what's going on here. Mild surplus though, because I don't know. I still feel that I'm properly training at home, but I don't want to gain significant weight anymore and deviate from the weight where I'm at right now, because I can tell that I've gained some fat and stuff. And up until January time, so beginning of January, end of December, I don't want to see a significant increase of scale weight anymore. That's why it's a mild surplus, still better than just maintenance in my opinion. And then from January onwards, going into the contest prep. It is set now. Next year, it is contest prep. So I made up my mind. It's not going to happen 2022. 2021 is the deal, simply because of the things that we mentioned. And so primarily, I want to compete with you. This is a goal in our life. And and then also besides competing with a lot of my athletes as well, it's the perfect timing, I think. And this is something that I don't want to wait any longer for. And it seems like everything is heading into a positive direction with all of the vaccines coming out now. And thus, I would very much assume that by the second half of the next year, that we are already in a spot where bigger events are taking place again.
Yeah, I think Boris has kind of spoken and said, by Easter, we'll have everything pretty sorted. But I wouldn't go off Boris. But still.
Boris came out and said, the bodybuilding shows, they will take place next year again. Thank God.
I was actually on the WMBF's website yesterday, looking at all the different shows, because we spoke and had a back and forth, and we're like, we could do some, I want to do as many as I can and really enjoy it, milk out that lean physique. So if I can do any in Germany, I don't know how that process really works in terms of international competitors coming over. I know we have our kind of finals and internationals, but I think even then you have to have like placed top 3 to then come to the UK international finals. So I don't know how that all works, but I definitely want to try and do a few shows and kind of get my feet wet in different organizations. Because like you said, things should be open up. That opens up a lot of confidence. And man, like to be able to do that with yourself, like doing it on my own, yeah, I mean, cool. But having someone actually with me who's interested and actually like doing everything I'm doing, that would be such a fun time.
Yeah, and just considering that we have been doing the improvement season ever since like 2017, we've been in a completely different place mentally, but also physically speaking, and doing it another time now together, like very much picking up Revive to stage, so to speak. It's going to be crazy also to see the transformation from the two of us. It's so funny because just on one of the last vlogs, we are now releasing our vlogs publicly as well. They come like 1 year after we released it over on the member side. However, I released mine and there was someone like commenting very negatively about like, okay, I didn't know that people with no muscle mass are allowed to compete or so, right? And of course, it stings when someone is saying something like this, right? Because I'm putting on a lot of work and effort and time, of course, into the entire thing. And it's not something that anyone would take easy, right? I mean, especially sometimes when you're not in the greatest place, that hurts even more so and makes you question and doubt yourself, even though that it's just one random guy on the internet who doesn't really know what he's honestly really knows what he's talking about because he doesn't know you and stuff. And I just have that. And then you've made a post about like the transformation from you ever since the beginning. And that made me keep all of the things, take it once again in a different perspective when it comes to my own progress, because 2009, 2010, I was completely in a different spot from a physical perspective. I was weighing 64 kilograms, never kind of lifted and stuff, right? And if you look at me during that time, I was skinny fat. I had no muscle mass whatsoever, right? And being now here at around like 90 kilograms, comparing myself to my former self from like years back with someone who's not the genetic elite, right? And only having trained effectively, what is it then, 7 years or so, because it was, when I saw that picture from 2009, it wasn't that I jumped straight into training. So effectively, I've trained like, what is it, 6-7 years? And from those 6-7 years, I would even say like 3 or 4 years weren't even really good and productive at all, if not even more of those, right? So I think when you keep all of those things in perspective, then I've come already a long way. And I think that there are a lot of listeners probably thinking and sometimes questioning themselves and doubting themselves as well. Well, I would like you to take a step back and take a look at how far you've come already. And I would bet my ass off that nearly each and everyone has seen a tremendous change already. Maybe it's not something that is Instagram worthy in the sense of like getting millions of followers, but probably you've already come such a long way. And especially considering when I just reflected on myself and looking back, I've put on a lot of muscle mass, but I know that my starting point was also much, much lower than other starting points. And thus that's why I'm here where I am. If I had started at a different starting point, perhaps I would have been bigger now. But everything that a guy like this says, man, it's not news to me. I know that I'm not the biggest. I know that I don't have the most muscle mass there is. I know that. That's not news. So if you just like smear it in my face, that's first and foremost, I think, inappropriate and not kind. And secondarily, it's nothing that I don't know already, unfortunately. Right? But I'm already working on it. And that should be appreciated, I think.
From my point of view, the comment was disgusting, distasteful. People like that in the world are some of the problem with the world, I would say, because it's just incredibly inappropriate to comment such a thing. It's not like you were on your like vlog going, I'm competing, I'm going to win, I'm doing this. And it's not like you were in over your head. It was just a case of bodybuilding is my love. It's my passion. I've had this goal for a long, long time. I've come such a long way and this is where I'm going to go. And this is what upsets me sometimes with social media is people have such unrealistic expectations. And we know this because we don't work with just genetic freak of clients. We have some that are like impressive, like we mentioned Z, but then there are people who are average, there are people below average, and then they get upset when they see such things, and they get disheartened. But I would say I think that's why I have built a following that I had built, and people like me in that sense, because I'm not genetic freak and I'm average. And then I think likewise for you, Pascal, you have your own story and journey, and there's people that relate to you more than they do me. And I think that's kind of beautiful in its own sense, because you don't have to be a genetic freak to get all the rewards that bodybuilding will give you, and all of the kind of favors and the life lessons and the character it will build. So I love that you are still pursuing it despite that, because bodybuilding wouldn't be around if only the best were competing. Like you need the people who are building it up and doing it, and it's all about you versus you. Like that's what it's about. So yeah, I thought the comment was completely disrespectful, and that sort of person, I just don't want to give them any time of day.
Yeah, absolutely. And normally I'm standing above that, but I also am going through times where I don't feel great, right? And in these moments when someone is then bringing up such a comment, it can destroy your entire day, or maybe for some people even the entire journey, right? And that is so sad, because I think that everyone has started off to improve their life and not feel more miserable due to something like bodybuilding or so. And I don't find it great that there are people out there feeling, what's it called again? What's it called again, Steve? Feeling entitled. That's what I want to say. Feeling entitled to then bring their opinion, which is just destructive and just harmful in any kind of way, to the table, when there's nothing valuable coming out of that. And I was even getting back to him saying like, man, you're always coming on here and just bringing up negative comments. Never anything good comes out of your mouth whenever I see you commenting. And I would just like to know why. If you don't really like our content, if you don't really like what we have to say or the way we look, why do you continue coming here? There are hundreds of thousands of channels out there that perhaps suit your needs, suit what it is that you want or so, right? But why are you bothering then coming to us in the first place? And then even talking down on us? I don't know, there must be a reason, and I can think of certain reasons which I don't want to bring up, but I find it inappropriate, and that just doesn't, I'm not just bringing it up because of me, but in general. So I think that so many people have experienced that, or don't really like to share their journey because they don't feel, I don't know, proud of their own accomplishment or achievements, just because there are some freaks out there that get all of the attention also. And when they bring themselves into the limelight, they just get shit for it, even though that it was a massive achievement.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement. And yeah, it's kind of where social media can be really evil in a way, but on a the flip side is how positive, and the majority of the Revive Strong community and the people that listen to this podcast are people who build one another up, and they understand the role of lifestyle, genetics, and all these other factors, and that it doesn't, like, your physique and how you look isn't necessarily like, doesn't determine how intelligent you are or how good a person you are or a coach you are. It's just, you get what you kind of get. You can't kind of get any more just by working harder. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So it's where social media can be a double-edged sword, and I'm just glad the majority of our supporters and the people out there are very, very positive. But you're right, it's unfortunate that negative comments like this can really knock you sideways. But then that's when I don't know if this is the right analogy, but you have like the safety net of your team. Like we talk back and forth. I know I've had it before where I've been knocked for six, where someone's kind of questioned me and put like doubts in my mind about various things. And so I just come back to you and I'm like, you kind of slap me in the face. Kind of not really, because you can't, but you slap me in the face and just put my mind straight, which I think is important. So I think it's so great to have people around you like that. And I guess that's where it all comes from. Like, surround yourself by people who build you up rather than people that just knock you down. And that isn't to say don't have people that don't challenge you, because we do challenge each other, and there should be people that challenge you, but in a positive way, not just like just completely rude for no apparent reason, because that does the opposite. That doesn't build anyone up.
I think you are such a great example with it. Just like ignoring or just continuing your journey. Because you in the beginning, you have this YouTube channel since when? Like
2010 or something? Yeah, something like
that. And just look back at the old videos, right? I mean, probably you can laugh about those videos you yourself as well, but you got massive flack for those as well. And at first, people were just like, what is this? You're skinny. You don't have the genetics. And now look at you. So many people admiring you, especially like after the last 3 years. They take a look at your physique and just want to be like you now. And this just shows how much work and effort you put in that, and how much dedication as well, because all of those negative things didn't make you deviate from what it is that you truly am passionate about and want to just like go through and achieve. And that's great, because first they were kind of laughing, then they were, I don't know, was there a middle ground in between? I don't think. First they were laughing and now they are hating or admiring.
I think this is funny because it reminds me of what I just discussed with you, where I know Jared Feather just turned an IFBB pro, and like people weren't really necessarily, I think there was probably quite a lot of people that were a bit skeptical of kind of Renaissance periodization, their methods, what they're doing. And over time, Jared's just been knocking things down, natural pro in various organizations. Now he's an IFBB pro, and he's only like at the edge of where he's going to eventually be. Slowly but surely, more people are going to be going, what's this guy doing? Oh shit, he's moved up fast. Oh, science? Ooh, what's this? And I view our journey as somewhat similar in that that's kind of the way I'm trying to navigate. Unfortunately, I don't think I have the genetic potential that Jared has, but I'll do my all. But it's beautiful to see that. But also, it reminds you that don't just ignore someone and kind of what they're doing just based off the fact that they haven't achieved something. Kind of judge them on the kind of sense that they're speaking and the results they've got maybe for other people, that sort of thing. So, I don't know. It's a bit of a tangent, but worthwhile, I think.
Absolutely. What about you currently in regards to training, nutrition? Just a quick update.
I've maybe done something that I wouldn't recommend many people do, but I'll be honest about what I'm doing.
Drugs.
So, yeah, I think I might have said last time, because I finished the mini cut and I took a short deload because I hadn't accumulated that much fatigue. So I thought I don't need a full deload, so I can get into training from home. And so I've been in a surplus, and I'm now in the second week of my mesocycle. And I actually have trained now for 9 days in a row. So I took a short deload and trained 9 days in a row. Not really a smart move. This is why I don't recommend it to many people. But I want to shuffle, so my rest days are now on a Sunday again, because things are starting to open up. And I think it would be nice if I could have a rest day on the weekend, so I have a full day I could put towards being social if there was anything going on. So I'm training through until Saturday, and then I'll take Sunday off. Gyms will reopen on the Wednesday, so I'll still have another few days at home training. But I'm fortunate that I have quite a bit of decent kit, so my transition into the gym will be like, I don't know, some things will be exactly the same, other things will be a small modification. But at the moment, it's like you were saying there, you're in a slight surplus. I have to keep an eye on my surplus, because if I want to gain up until like the start of April, I can't be gaining fast, because I basically have 5 pounds I can gain between now and April. So I have to keep it under the thumb. I have to gain it very moderate pace, basically the slower rate of gain that we normally recommend, 0.5% every 2 weeks. If I end up overshooting that, which I think is unlikely given my appetite issues normally, then I'll have to start dieting soon. Like I have to go into a maintenance sooner and start dieting sooner, which is fine. I just, have my plan in place that I'd like to adhere to. So yeah, I think it's just a case of not pushing food up too soon, because at the moment my appetite's really good. I'm still finding myself like hungry at various points in the day, and still eating like plenty of like fruit, veg, fiber, oats, that sort of thing. So I'm not having to like get any appetite tricks, which is like, for me, I was really struggling with my appetite moving into the mini cut. So the mini cut really opened up my appetite. It has done for like the last 2 weeks. So hopefully that sustains itself. So yeah, things are going smooth. I'm pretty happy.
This makes me to a good point, because so many people are always like asking what's the appropriate rate of weight gain and how long you should be gaining for. And both of our scenarios now are a valid case where something like a slower rate of weight gain is appropriate and also recommended. While we normally aim for something between 0.25 to up to 0.5%, I have plenty of examples where I would take it slower than this even. And I think that normally people were always like, yeah, but isn't that too slow? But it just aligns with your overall goals, and it would just like be foolish just to push it harder then.
Yeah, I don't really want to have to lose more than like 20 pounds for my prep. And so if I want to avoid a diet before the diet, which is maybe what you're ending up doing, depending on how things go, I need to keep it a bit tighter. So yeah, like you said, there's always a context in which you can make something that maybe isn't generally recommended a recommendation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm content, happy. Nothing exciting really going on my end.
Okay, cool. Shall we get over to questions?
Cool. So we have Kid Ludovic. Do you think that's his name or her name?
Kid Sid Ludovic.
Kid Sid. Sid.
Maybe it's, I don't know.
Kid Sid.
I have no idea.
Mr. Ludovic has asked, this is related to what we were just talking about. In a mass/bulking phase, is there an upper limit for fat intake in grams per kilo or body weight, or grams per pounds of body weight? I tend to eat more than the general 1 gram per kilogram, so I thought it could be interesting to know. I also eat a large amount of carbs, 400 grams plus. Thanks.
I mean, I would assume yes, because we know from studies that if you consume the vast majority of calories coming from fat, that it's more easily stored as fat. But we also have then to recognize that depending on the severity of your caloric deficit, it then depends on how much fat is being stored, because the more you are in a caloric deficit, the easier the fats are then being deposited as fat as well. So if you are in a major caloric surplus, then of course a lot of those fat, the dietary fat that you're taking in or consuming, is being stored as energy. Whereas when it's more of a mild caloric surplus, then perhaps not that much of a percentage of that dietary fat is being stored as fat. But once again, the studies confirm that when you consume a higher caloric intake coming from fats, dietary fats, then that will be more likely to be stored as fat as well. I can't really give the precise numbers anymore, which that one study has shown. There was one very, I wouldn't call like famous study, but one that is very much coming to my mind, where they looked at overeating coming from carbohydrates or fat, and the participants with the fat intake, they stored more fat or body fat after the study as well. So yeah, what's the general recommendation? I can't really say, because this is something that more so comes intuitive to me. Like, honestly, when I know that I have a more heavier individual, then I take into consideration their personal preferences, how they've been eating once before they came to me, and then based off of that, I'm actually then saying like, okay, this is something that I feel like is the maximum intake we should have, and let's aim for something that is a little bit below that. Most of the time, I don't really like to go beyond something like 100 grams or so, even if it's a bigger individual. I don't know why. This is just more something that is probably in my head, but this seems to me like a number of a dietary fat intake that is simply not needed. what I like to do is have a moderate intake. And more is probably not beneficial, and less is probably, I mean, you can get away with less, but the thing is, when people are saying like, yeah, I'm aiming for the minimum fat intake, is that really your minimum fat intake, or is that the minimum fat intake that you would like to be? Because when you don't get regular blood tests and get your physical state checked the entire time, do you really know that this is the bare minimum? Or sometimes you can even go lower than this, right? So I would say like go for a moderate intake, and then you're absolutely golden. Why aim for the maximum and why aim for the minimum is my question.
I think that was well said and aligns with a lot of things I would think and agree with. The only thing I would do is like a theoretical, what's too high of a fat intake in a mass. I would probably say where you consume so many fats, you don't get in sufficient protein, first of all, for sure. Because if you just got all your calories from fats, it's unrealistic. So you just get all your calories from fat and carbs, and you therefore undereat protein. And then potentially also for some people, I would imagine, I guess some people probably aren't as heavily reliant on carbs, but where your carbs aren't sufficient. So basically, if you're eating so many fats that you're under-eating what you need to perform your best carbohydrate ways, what you need protein to recover and have muscle protein synthesis at its best, that's probably the kind of practical upper end. But again, there's also the theoretical benefit of having higher carbs versus fats due to kind of how they're stored, kind of, and like nutrient partitioning and those sort of rationale as well. So yeah, I just, the only times I have gone above 100 grams of fat with people, but it's more so, fuck me, you have to eat so much damn food, just get it in. So
yeah,
it's
that's
just
true.
A case like that.
This is also the only time that I can think of it, when they are struggling to get in all of those calories. Because let's be real, people have still a life, and sometimes eating the entire day carbohydrates is simply not feasible for most. And then it's much, much easier to also have a high fat intake because of the caloric density.
I normally have people, like, one person springs to mind, Fabian, if he's listening. He's on like 5,000 calories, something stupid. He's just like struggling so bad to gain weight. I'm just like, just come on. Like, just to hit 5,000 calories, you're not going to undereat anything. Like, you just need to overeat to get that food down you. So, but the hard thing is, whilst fats are more calorie dense, so theoretically makes it easier to get more calories in, they also tend to be slower digest. Well, they're slow digesting. They tend to promote satiety a lot. So it can be really hard when you start piling in the fat. So the only thing I would say finally is when people are bulking and I see their fats are higher than maybe 1 gram per kilo, much higher than that, I'm like, where are you getting those fats from? Are you just eating a lot of ice cream, Ben and Jerry's, pizza, and like saturated fats and junk food? Because quite often that happens. So when I see people go for like just protein and calorie targets, I think that can be great. But I think especially the crew who are more, if it fits your macros and just don't consider nutrient quality so much, they tend to go for a lot of the fattier kind of sources, and they tend to be more processed. They tend to be more saturated fats, which aren't the best fats to eat tons of. You're better off having like the monounsaturated Mediterranean style diet. So yeah, that would only be my additional take on it. But you're right. Why avoid the extremes? Like, go moderate. It's probably the best.
Unless it's very much needed, which I think is hardly ever the case. Unless you are someone like Fabian who needs 5,000-6,000 calories and lives a normal life, we can't just like eat and sleep and just train the entire time. Mental. And fart.
Yeah, lots of farting and shitting, to be honest. You have to eat whilst you're on the toilet. It's just going through you. Next question.
Yeah.
Spencer Keane has asked, how much do you guys rely on goal setting in your own training and in training of clients? Do you find it helpful to set long-term goals such as certain weight you'd like to reach during a massing phase, or a new 10-rep max on a particular lift? Or do you prefer to stick to the daily goals, like getting your steps in and hitting your macros and meal timing?
It's funny because I haven't really thought about it in a long time. And I know this may sound counterintuitive for many people, but I'm not training for any kind of specific goals. I have no real goals in mind because I'm just enjoying the ride. And I'm just ticking off the boxes each and every single day, which then will dictate the goals anyway, right? So the goal is, if you really want to put it that way, the goal is just to get each and every single day done and do your very best with that. And I know that many people need a goal to stay motivated, to stay focused. I have a lot of my athletes who are feeling a little bit lost once one goal is ticked off, and then they are just like, I'm losing a little bit the drive and the motivation in the gym. And can we set somewhat of a goal so that I have something to work towards to? And I can absolutely understand where this is coming from. However, I'm at a point where I don't need any kind of goal, and I'm still doing what it is that I need to be doing. I can't put it in a different way. For many people, it will sound like, how can you continue doing this without any kind of specific goal? The goal is unclear. It's kind of, I don't know what the goal is, but I know I want to be bigger and I know I want to progress. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I'm the same in that I don't have any like specific goals in mind. I ultimately want to be my best, and I know that I need to therefore turn up every day, tick the boxes, enjoy the ride, and keep moving forward. And kind of, I always just like the idea of, and this is what I tend to tell clients, they're like, oh, kind of, how much weight can I like lose in this period of time, or how much muscle will I gain by this point? And some of those are more kind of known, like in terms of fat loss, like you can kind of get a gauge of how much body weight someone should be able to lose in a period of time. But ultimately, it comes down to that individual and whether or not they can adhere to it, how their body responds to it. Various factors come into play, and there's too many. So if you have your goal set, like I need to have a 6-pack or I need to have this body weight by a particular time, you're just constantly be asked like, are we there yet type of thing? And you're just constantly feeling miles away. Whereas if you just focus on, like you said, enjoying the ride, doing what you need to do, doing your job, ticking those boxes every day, you're slowly ticking away at what you need to do to ultimately get to that outcome goal. And so it's much less stressful to have to then thinking about, oh, I need this all the time. So I'm very much the same. And I try and encourage my clients to be the same way. I do sometimes map out kind of rate of gain goals, and I tell them like, this is what we're aiming for. But it doesn't mean every week we're going to achieve a 0.25% rate of gain. Like it's just is unlikely to happen. But by this point, we should, like, if it's a competitor, it's like, by this point, we've planned backwards. We should be shredded. And we should be roughly maybe this weight by this point, but it's very much like a rough idea of where we're going to be. Let's take ourselves where we are now, do our best job, take each day as it comes. That type of thing that's the way I prefer to go about things. So, and I never set like 10 rep max goals or something like that. Just never like, maybe like.
And I think that when we take a look at it from a different perspective in life in general, I do understand that there are some goals that need to be pursued, such as, I don't know, you always wanted to become a doctor, and now you've been working 15, 20 years in order to actually get there. Totally cool. Then I also see how rewarding it is to get there. But I also think that if you put a goal on a pedestal, and I want to choose my words carefully because I don't know if it's applying to each and every single situation. So I keep it rather more general. If you could put a goal on a pedestal and that goal is more superficial, so it's more just a thought of, okay, once I get there, X, Y, Z is happening. So I don't know about the 6-pack, for example. Once I get to that goal of having a 6-pack, I'm a happier individual. Or once I'm rich, I can just relax and recover and do nothing at all anymore. And that makes me happy. I think when you put that on a pedestal and you eventually get there, it could be that you're just not happy and satisfied at all. I think that goals, they always develop over time and evolve over time rather. So once you take the next step forward, all of a sudden that goal is slightly transforming into something else. And the closer you get to it, it's kind of what's it called in English? A fata morgana? Like when you are in the desert and you just like, a mirage. So you're walking towards something and kind of in far distance, you see something, right? And the closer you get, the more it kind of shapes to something else. And I think that goals are the same way because you are changing along the way. the goal is probably also changing as well. And that's why, for me personally, over time, I've realized like those superficial goals, they don't really matter that much. What matters more is the journey that you're taking. And I know that you've probably heard so often and so many people are talking about it. And if people right now don't know what this means, maybe you're right now at the beginning of your journey. And then throughout time, you will come to the realization what we are talking about and referring to at the moment. But I think that those eventual goals, they are most of the time not as rewarding as we like to think. It's like we are because of human biology or just the human psychology. We are always like, okay, we want that shiny object. And once we have that, we want that next shiny object. That's also why we are never satisfied with no matter what we have. We are always striving for the next thing. And that's just typical human psychology. And that's why having an eventual goal is always like chasing the carrot. And you will never catch it, to be honest, right? And that's why I rather take joy in trying to catch the carrot in trying the carrot to catch the carrot itself.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
And I think it's becoming better known that that's probably how things work out and that's the way to go, because sometimes I do have clients who will say like, and I'll ask kind of what's your goal, and they have like a picture in mind of like a person, and I'm just like, oh, okay, like it's like a genetic freak basically. Most of the time I'm just like, oh, man, I can tell you you're gonna have better arms than you have now. You're not gonna have this guy's arms. He is like creme de la creme, like has amazing arms, whatever it is that they have. And that's why it's important to have those like SMART goals, kind of specific, measurable, adherable, maybe. I can't remember what it is, what the other ones are, but basically realistic is the most important one, I think. Kind of make sure they're realistic. And yeah, it's hard to kind of give someone a real clear outcome goal in terms of you're going to look like this at the end of this process, especially muscle gain. Like really, there's like you should just focus on kind of being in the gym and making sure your training's going really well, and that's going to lead to more muscle, but you ain't going to see the muscle for a long time until you start cutting down. So it's tricky within bodybuilding in off season particularly.
Basically what we also said in the beginning after this comment that I received, like, hey man, I'm trying since years already to get big. If I would have been disheartened by, or if I would have set a goal for myself in the beginning of like, after 5 years, I want to look like this, and I don't, should I give up now, or do I continue just trying eventually to get there?
I have an example, which is funny to me. I don't know why this really sticks in my head, but I had a friend back years and years ago when we would train together with kind of training partners, and he would like really train hard, but he was big. He really was on like this mass. I can't remember how much he weighed, but maybe it was like 230 pounds. I remember him saying that like Rob Riches, do you know who Rob Riches is?
I've heard of that name.
Like insane physique. Like I think he was like maybe a Mr. Olympia physique competitor, like really impressive. And I remember him saying like, if I lose, like Rob Riches is like 200 pounds on stage. If I lose 20 pounds, I'm going to be like in Rob Riches shape, but like bigger, 10 pounds bigger than him. And he lost like 20 pounds. It was like, and he had to lose like 60 pounds eventually or something to be any sort of lean. I can't remember. I'm exaggerating. And it just really like those, you just, especially when people are dieting down, they often don't realize how much fat they're holding on to and how light you have to sometimes get to reveal some of these things. So it's, that realistic thing has really become unrealistic due to social media, because we do have these expectations of, in the average person I see is Rob Riches standard. So that must mean if I'm average, I'm going to get there. And it's like, no. The average person you see is elite. The average people, you don't see them. And then the below average, you never see them. So then you think you're like an outlier or weird or something. So and the only other thing I was going to say, Pascal, did you ever have a goal physique in mind? Is there any physique you looked up to at the beginning, I imagine, that was like, that's who I want to look like?
No, to be honest, never. I just wanted to look better. Like, honestly, at first, of course, I was standing in front of the camera and I wanted to just look like the typical male model, right? But if I now look back at those male model pictures, I'm just like, well, they are skinny and they have a skinny six pack, but that's basically it, right? Yeah. And my once again, my goals have, or what I deemed as aesthetic back then, has completely transformed to something else. Like back then, I wanted to be as skinny as possible, like 2009, right? No matter how, I just wanted to be skinny. And now, like 10, 11 years later, I'm just posting something on my Instagram stories from Shelby Stans, his athletes, the females. They are just freaking impressive. And they are females who are carrying more muscle mass than the average guy, or just like the most male natural bodybuilders. Yeah. Crazy physiques. And if you ever had asked me in the past if I like this or if I find this aesthetically pleasing, I would have said, hell no, I never want to look that way. Now I look at female bodybuilders and I think like, I would love to look that way.
They're sometimes, because their waist, they just looks like so X-frame.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. I even said to Katie, like, sometimes I have the feeling that females can get in much, much crazier shape even than males. At least, I don't know, at least at enhanced females. There's something about I hate that term, but the dry look that they can create that very few male enhanced bodybuilders can create. And that is, it's super impressive. The details that come out with some of the female enhanced bodybuilders, like some of the muscles you don't even knew existed before that then pop out, and just like the graininess and stuff. It's impressive. And so I started off with wanting to look like a male model, and now I want to look like an enhanced female athlete.
Oh dear, I'm glad that went down the way it did. That was good. I can say where I always idolized is a bit strong. The person I always wanted to look like, my goal outcome, was Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah. I think many people were like that.
Yeah. In the Calvin Klein
that one
adverts.
picture from Calvin Klein commercial, right?
That was it.
Everyone knows that one.
Whereas I look at him now and I'm like, I mean, he's aesthetically pleasing. He has nice abs and he's good shape. He's fairly well muscled. I'm like, man, that's like, I mean, it's intermediate. Like, it's all right, but I'm bigger than that now, and I am still nowhere near satisfied. I still think he looks more aesthetically pleasing than me, though.
But that's
no idea what legs he had.
That's something that you can't really change, though.
And now I look at like Chris Bumstead is just a peak example. Like everyone wants to look like Chris, and I don't blame them because he looks that classic shape. He is like the epitome of like a great classic shape.
Or Kiwan. I can't really pronounce his name.
The black dude.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That is honestly, this is one of the craziest, if not most perfect physiques that I've ever seen. Like, honestly.
His
and
front
that
double.
Is, we have like now 50 years ever since like the golden age where there were freaking aesthetically pleasing physiques there as well. But his physique is just like, it's mind-blowing. Like, I can't really look at any specific body part without being just like amazed. And that is crazy because having kind of a nearly complete physique is very rare. Very rare. And when I look at him, it's just like, holy shit. Hey, your legs are massive. You have a super tiny waist. Great abs. You have a huge V-taper in general because your back is wide, your arms are thick, delts are popping. Man, your chest is also popping as well. What is going on with this physique? I mean, it's crazy, ridiculous.
The only one I can think of that was maybe close to that sort was like Flex Wheeler, maybe. He was pretty fucking incredible.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just but everything.
The problem
it's like
is
a balloon
always
animal.
that with those old pictures, because we didn't really have the picture quality that we have nowadays. That's why it's sometimes hard to really grasp how lean they were in the past and what kind of physique they had, because the picture quality was so bad. I mean, you take a look at those pictures and it's not necessarily bad, but you can get so much more high definition nowadays, and you can see every single line, every single detail nowadays, whereas you couldn't in the past, right? And that's sometimes it gives the impression that they weren't as hard and as dry, but I think it has mostly just to do with the quality of the cameras that we had in the past. Because right nowadays you can see every single pore, right? And yeah, it's kind of unfortunate though, because I would love to see the development in like true development, whether there was a huge difference or whether this is just our perception from the pictures and images that we are able to see nowadays.
Yeah, I know, definitely. Next question.
Yeah.
So this one is from Lyle W. Dempsey. And he has asked...
I was hoping for Lyle McDonald when I heard Lyle.
I don't know what Lyle would ask us, something uncomfortable. What are the most common imbalances, weak points, or neglected areas you see among aspiring physique athletes? And what are some quick recommendations to correct them?
Oh, very interesting question. It's hard to answer, though, because I think that common imbalances, we need to, of course, decipher of what caliber of an athlete we are talking about. Because when they've already invested a lot of time and effort and stuff, right, then the imbalances become more pronounced, kind of, because the entire package sticks out, and then you can really decipher of like where the weaknesses are. And also the majority of people have never gotten lean enough to really detect what the true weakness is. Because sometimes you may perceive that a body part is your weakness, but you're just carrying too much fat in that body part, and thus it just looks kind of flat, soft, not even present, and then you're getting lean, and all of a sudden it just comes out and pops out. So for example, here, my delts, right? This is something, I'm holding a lot of fat around the transition part from the delts to the biceps and the triceps. A lot of fat here. And that's why it's kind of flat straight down, right? But I know that I got some delts. I know that. But this will first be revealed once I'm getting to a very low body fat percentage. Something like that. And that's why I would always be careful with saying that I have XYZ body part that is super weak and I would like to bring it up. Sometimes it's just a matter of you've never been lean enough to really figure out whether it's a weak part of yours or not. We are, of course, because we are primarily into physique sports, we're not talking about strength, but more so just from an aesthetic look. One of the most common imbalances, in my opinion, is though, I would even say hamstrings and maybe even quads, I would say. But this is something that I could be biased, where this just springs to my mind that it just, because it requires a lot of time, I think, to be put towards something like the quads and the hamstrings to really show itself, because they are such big muscle groups and they require a lot of work, effort, and just like, I don't know, uncomfortable times. And this is something that I think many people don't like. And we've talked about it in the past. It requires you to be so much more focused. And even when you're dieting, it requires you to be so much more driven to get a proper training session in for legs. Whereas an upper body, you can always kind of push through.
I would say I definitely agree with you on the first point in terms of, do you really know what your weaknesses are? And then also, a lot of people I work with are at a stage in their lifting career where they haven't developed weaknesses yet, because not to sound, and I think saying the whole body is weak is the wrong way to say it, but they can bring everything up. So there's no point focusing unnecessarily on a particular area. I would say I have the same bias as you, at least, where generally legs are the area that I guess for a lot of males, especially when they first get into the gym and they're a bit clueless, maybe they just train upper body a lot and they dog out on legs because it's uncomfortable. It's kind of technique heavy a lot of the time, or more technical. So they just don't do it so much. So I think generally legs, and in particular hamstrings, just because people end up doing like leg press, hack squats. Like there's so many different movements that are quad dominant, and lunges and things like this. Whereas the hamstrings is like hip hinges, which are uncomfortable and quite technique heavy to make sure that you're hitting the hamstrings.
Yeah.
And then there's the leg curl machine. And then maybe you do like, I don't know, double the amount of volume for your quads versus your hamstrings. And maybe that's appropriate because, I mean, quite often hamstrings require less volume. But if your technique's poor and things like that, so I often find hamstrings are underdeveloped. And part of it may be down to posing as well, because I do see people pose, but if they don't know how to smudge their rear knee into their side, into their leg, then it looks like the hamstring just doesn't hang. But if you can pose properly, then I often see it with hamstrings. So I'd say, but the most commonly reported, I would say to me, is probably arms. I think it's just guys want big arms.
No, absolutely. It's very interesting about the hamstring and the quad separation in regards to training, because there's definitely something to it. In regards to quads, when you're doing something like squats and leg press and hack squat, whatever, you are always hitting the quads to some extent. Right? There's no way around it. Even if your form is shitty, your quads will always be involved to some extent. However, something like SLDLs or just like hip hinge variations, you can mess them up big time, especially when you have a massively rounded back. Then a lot of the stimulus is not going towards the hamstrings, but very much just towards perhaps a little bit to the glutes and also the lower back in particularly. And that's why, I think that there's definitely something to it in regards to the hamstring development because of the technique. For example, quads, once again, you will always get some stimulus in there, but when you don't do the hamstring movements appropriately, then way less stimulus is going towards the hamstrings.
I find a lot of people come from doing like squats and then like leg presses, lunges and things like this. And then for their hamstrings, they're like, yeah, I do deadlifts off the floor and leg curls. And that's all they do. It's like, well, deadlifts off the floor, they don't really get you a very big hamstring stimulus. You might involve them somewhat for sure. And then just some leg curls. So they seem to be under prioritized a lot of the time. So I see those. And sometimes glutes. Normally glutes are fine, but I've had it with some guys where their glutes just don't seem to be entirely impressive. So those are the areas. But yeah, like you said, legs in general, hamstrings particularly, seems to be the areas that are most undeveloped. Next question.
I think we're coming up on time also because I have like an appointment in 15 minutes and I would love to get to the toilet. I'm not taking a dump. Just peeing this time.
Oh, we need to pick a person, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted to get to now. So heading over here first. Then where is it?
I have a question as well.
There it is. So we are 177. Should you do die breaks? And then comment picker, the link in here. Once again, 26 comments. We are always getting 26 comments. Very weird, yeah.
I felt like there was a lot of comments
and pick a random winner, and it is Samuel Black. Like mini cuts, but don't cafe for refeeds. Don't get this. I do have one slightly higher calorie day when cutting, so I can still go out for dinner with girlfriend, but it is not for a refeed. That's great. And there have been so many great comments, actually. It was very, very interesting because we've talked about mini cuts, we've talked about refeeds, and it was like so many people weren't doing refeeds or diet breaks because it turned out that it didn't really do any kind of good for them. So more so aligning with my experiences. And there have been so many people who are regularly doing refeeds and diet breaks, which turns out that's great and very beneficial for them, which more aligns with you. So it's very interesting that it kind of confirms what we've talked about, that a lot of the individual component plays into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was interesting because we spoke about that published study you got where it's like a rebuttal towards Bill Campbell's refeed study came out by Jackson Pios, and it's interesting. And we are working on a roundtable for that, by the way. So I hope that goes down quite quickly because I'd like to get that out there. Do you have a question for this time? I have one in my head. If you
go ahead.
So this time, guys, I would like to hear, who was your goal physique when you started?
Oh,
and bonus, has it changed and who's it changed to? I'd be interested to hear that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sweet.
Cool.
Guys, good chatting.
It was.
Talk to you
so
soon.
Thank you very much, as always, guys, for chatting or for listening. And as always, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button. You know the drill by now. I don't always need to repeat myself, but I'm still continuing and repeating myself each and every single time. So, guys, I guess we will speak to you next week, and have a great week. Cheers.
See you guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.